4, 3. Call this council meeting to order, and at this time, if you're able, please rise for the national anthem.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command, car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Right. At this time, if I can call on Councillor Bruno for our land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Worship. Niagara region is situated on treaty land. The land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island who live and work in Niagara today. The City of Port Colborne stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live.
Thank you, Councillor. Adoption of the agenda. If I could have Councillors Danch and Elliott move the agenda. Are there any questions or changes? All in favor? That's carried. I do not have any declarations of interest, conflict of interest. Are there any, though? Make sure we didn't miss anybody. Okay. We have two sets of minutes. We have the Committee of the Whole Strategic Planning Session and the regular meeting of Council, March 28, 2022. If I could have Councillors Bruno and Bagu move those minutes. Any questions to either one? All in favor? That's carried. We have items pulled this evening. Under staff reports, 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, 8.6, 8.7, and correspondence 9.3. We have no presentations, no delegations, so I'll get into my mayor's report, which is very short this evening. For the first time in Port Colborne history, we celebrated Tugboat Bunny. Just as Santa arrives in the canal at Christmas time, the Easter Bunny arrived on the deck of the pilot boat on a sunny Saturday morning. Many thanks to the BIA for coordinating the Easter Bunny arrival with the J.W. Cooper and her crew. After a big welcome from a big crowd along the Port Promenade on West Street, it was off to the Valet Center for an Easter egg hunt, which started at 11 a.m. It was great to see so many children at Valet filling their Easter baskets and participating in the crafts, activities, and skating all afternoon. And big shout out and well done to our special teams, events team, for helping make the Easter so excellent. Gail wrote that. The province is moving quickly on issues such as building and planning, housing, healthcare, climate change, and environmental initiatives. Things are changing quickly, and we want to make sure we don't miss out on anything. I'm attending the Good Roads Conference in Toronto on April 16th to 19th with Gary Long, our Director of Strategic Projects, and Steve Shapowski, our Director of Public Works, and the CAO, Scott Louie. The Premier will be there, as will his ministers and their staff, and Mr. Long has already arranged one-on-one meetings with Ministers of Health, Transportation, and Infrastructure. Gary, thank you. Great work on this. And I know these are not easy to set up, and meetings like this are crucial and critical and very productive for the City of Port Colborne. There ends my mayor's report. Regional Councillor won't be here this evening, or is not here this evening. Sorry, thank you. there really is not a lot going on at this moment at the region. But if you do have questions, I can take those, or you can email Councillor Davies at any time. Any questions? Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. You'll know under every term of council since the mid-90s, we've asked the question about whether we could take over some of that regional work. The last few years, it's been problematic, grass cutting in and around the middle bridge across from our public works yard, where we wait for the region to cut that grass and we could easily mobilize there. I am wondering if you would know, or could you check into before we get into the season, whether any of those discussions about either swapping or doing work for the region and billing back have happened, or what we might be able to expect there.
Steve, last term of council, I know Councillor Butters and I spoke to CAO Tripp with regards to that. He was open to discussions. Has anything occurred to this time yet, or do you want to have Councillor Davies and I move forward and get a meeting set up with you guys?
Yep, through your worship, we actually did complete some merged work together on our street sweeping services, but we haven't formalized anything on the grass cutting side, but that's something we can speak with their operations manager on to see if they're amicable to that, and then we can report back to council to see if we can come to an arrangement.
Councillor? Yeah. Great, thank you. Whatever you need, Steve, Fred and I can look after that for you. Good, thank you. Further questions with regards to the region? Okay, just before we move to the next one, just to, I just assumed everything was pulled tonight. If I could have Councillors Beauregard and Aquilina move the items that weren't pulled, all those in favor? That's carried. Councillors' remarks, Councillor Aquilina this week.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have much of an update, but I'd like to indicate that Sherkston Community Center had their Easter egg hunt on the weekend, and that yoga at the center is starting up again on April 14th. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beauregard.
I have no remarks this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just 2 items. I do apologize to CAO. I remember the last item late today around 4 o'clock, and I sent him an email to give him a heads up, and he may not have time to get my reply or to the resident. The first one, I sent an email to Public Works requesting when the speed radar signs are going to be re-erected throughout the city, and also the pedestrian traffic calming cones across from Shoppers. And then tonight, one of the delegates mentioned the traffic calming cones on Chippewa Road also. So maybe we could get an update on the installation timing.
CAO.
I'm sorry, through your worship to Councillor Baggio, I'm answering the rail cars.
Second one.
The second one hasn't been asked yet, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this one will be Steve and I'll be the next one.
Through your worship, so just wanted to inform council that we are getting our speed signs prepped for deployment within the next few weeks. The first areas will be Barrack Road between Elm Street and Highway 58. The next one is Elm Street near Victoria Street, and then also Bell Street near Fair Street. We'll also be reinstalling all the delineators on Clarence Street near Catherine, and also on Chippewa during the same timeline within the next 3 weeks.
Councillor.
Okay, I see they call them delineators. I call them traffic calming cones, so I can't spell that though. My second concern I sent to the CAO, a resident who does a lot of walking within the municipality stopped me and asked a question about the our railways, that there seems to be about 70-ish tanker cars, railway tanker cars stored within the city limits, one behind the Clarence Street in the quarries, and the other one just north of the marina, Mr. Mayor. And they're just wondering whether this poses some sort of hazard to the residents if something leaked, or is this just a depot that they store empty ones? And I thought it was a good question from the resident. not because we just had derailment in the town a couple weeks ago, but the tanker cars do have a concern because they're black and they're ominous looking, and so if I could pass it on to the CEO.
Scott?
Yeah, through your worship, Councillor Bagu, the timing is perfect, because when you told me that you were going to ask me for a second time, I was able to send a reminder to the operator of the short line rail, and the answer came in just before the meeting here. So I do know that most of those cars are empty. If they're the flat type squarish cars, they're empty. If they're the round tank type cars, rail cars, they actually have a material in them called LVGO. And that stands for, I had to Google it. I only know what they tell me, and I learn something new every day. Low vacuum gas oil. In this case, it's a light vacuum gas oil. It is soy-based, and if it spills, it actually, I'm told, turns to tofu on the ground. It's because it's soy. It's not the same as diesel or gasoline or a petroleum-based product. So there's no risk. This is the words from the Vice President of GO Rail, our short line operator. It's non-hazardous and non-toxic. And in brackets, only a handful of them. So of those 70 cars that the resident reported, only a handful of cars. I'm sorry, I don't have an exact number.
Counselor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the answer.
Counselor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. Just one, thank you to Greg and Olga. Last week, there was a meeting at the Red Wilson Center of people interested in fishing in Port Colborne. Some great attendance, between probably 25 and 28 people in the fishing community in Port Colborne and beyond. Wanted to resurrect Port Colborne as that great fishing town. Greg is compiling all their questions. Some were to the marina. Fortunately, Blair couldn't be there, but all of that will come back. The fishermen and tournament sponsors, as well as stores servicing fishermen, were very pleased with the responses and looking forward to some policy and procedures we could adopt. So just wanted to shout out to Greg and Olga and thank the fishermen for attending.
Great, thank you, Counselor. Counselor Elliott? Counselor Danch?
Thank you. Just one item, and I think the chiefs looked after it for me today. A little concern around the Neff and Fielden area with some traffic and the speed of the cars, and I believe the chiefs looked after that for me, so I just have to say thank you to that one.
Thank you. Counselor Hoyle?
Thanks, staff, for working on the various projects that I've brought forward to them. I've been asked like a whole whack of times now, so do we have a timeline on when the condo is going to get close to done and we can have our West Street back?
Mr. CAO?
So through your worship to Councillor Hoyle, I do not have a specific timeline. I can reach out to the contractors that are building it. I do know that there was, and I think we've all heard this on social media and various places, delays due to supply chain issues and I guess the carpenters union strike and whatever other strike there was. There was two of them. But I had a phone call with one of the proponents of the company last week about cars parked from the construction workers in the area where we kind of want to let customers of West Street stores and downtown stores park. And they were very willing to accommodate, to get us back to normal by pushing their vehicles back towards their own property or south of the construction site. And at that time, they said that they're full bore on the interior fit out. So where you used to just see a crane working and some outside work, the inside work is taking place now that will finish sort of the units and the future apartments or condo units. However, no time's attached. So I can make that phone call and report back to the next council meeting. Or if I'm away, have the the acting CAO that day, because I think I'm missing a council meeting, give you a report on when that will be, an estimated date of completion.
Counselor?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just two items. The Bethel Tower that wasn't lit up, I think it's lit up now, okay? Okay. Ironically, because it's a danger to aviation, the owner flew in with an airplane to our airport in Welland, got picked up with someone, and they were out there fixing. But he said that there's an automatic thing on there that lets them know when the lights are out. So something must have went wrong with that relay, and they were going to make sure that that still works. Just through you, Mr. Mayor, to the chief. Chief, are we expecting, or will you be bringing forward any updates on outstanding issues that may come forward with short-term rentals or things that staff is working on?
Chief?
Through the mayor to council, funny you ask, we were going to give you an update tonight on that during staff comments. If you want to wait till we get on that roll, hopefully we can answer anything, and if not, you can ask.
Great. Thank you. Now on to staff comments. CAO, anything?
Sure, just through your worship, the only one I had a note of is that one that Councillor Bodnar just referenced. And if it's okay with the chief, I'll go ahead and just provide an update. We've been working on short-term rental, I guess, regulation, for lack of a better term, we've been talking about it for quite a while now, probably years. We know that there are some behaviors that take place that the city would like to see sort of restricted. Big fires are permitted, but out of control fires, parking too many vehicles, overloading septic systems, noise, fireworks, those kind of activities. But also we know that there are many people who sort of are using their rental, and you know, we use the term Airbnb as sort of a catch-all, but it could be any of the other companies that are out there. It could be done privately through the newspaper or Facebook. I mean, I'm sure there's folks who've been renting for decades before we even had the internet to do your short-term rentals on. And it is an accepted practice, I think, in the municipality. And like any practice, there's good operators and bad operators. So we want to get this right. And in fact, speaking to the city's lawyer a little bit over a week ago, the lawyer said it's important to get this right, not fast. So her advice, and I think what we'll do is bring a staff report here if council wants us to talk about this, or maybe this update is sufficient. We can talk maybe offline. Her advice is to take an approach that includes the land use, so sort of a planning component, as well as a licensing component. So I'm sorry this is going to take a long time, this answer. To regulate behavior, you need a bylaw and bylaw enforcement. To regulate a land use, you need planning rules, or official plan and zoning bylaw considerations. So for example, you can't sell products out of a residential use. You need a commercial use, an industrial, and sometimes things have more than one use. And lastly, to regulate businesses, you need a licensing regime. We don't license every business in Port Colborne, but we license garages and a few other businesses that council has chosen to license over the years. When it comes to short-term rentals, I think we're going to be on a spectrum. It will be up to council. It could be anything from the Wild West of operating environments with no rules and no restrictions. As long as Airbnb will have you, you can operate, to a complete lockdown and it's not permitted in the boundaries of Port Colborne, or probably somewhere in the middle. And our lawyer is recommending that we have both a licensing regime, so an owner of a property that will be rented out will have to come to the city for a license. The license will include rules, and this will all be before council to decide. Presumably the license will include rules like inspections, safety, some work around number of nights. I've seen some creative things in other municipalities where once a person checks out, you can't have another person in for a certain amount of time in order to sort of reset the neighborhood and the impact on the neighborhoods, But also, in addition to the licensing regime, some kind of a land use planning. And that is a chance, if council chooses to take it, it will be an elected official decision, to sort of say, there are zones that we want to be free of short-term rentals, and there's zones where we want to permit short-term rentals. The same as, and I'll use an example, highway commercial. So the highway commercial zone permits certain businesses that are, say, not permitted in the downtown commercial, and we want to drive to those areas of the city or those zones. So I think that'll all be before council. It won't be before this year's rental season, obviously, which is only, I think we're sitting 5 or 6 weeks away from Victoria Day weekend. But again, based on legal advice, it's something we want to get done right, and we can continue. And the chief is aware of this, and we've talked a number of times in management meetings and one-on-ones. We'll still have a regulatory, or an enforcement responsibility around noise, fireworks, the unsavory uses and impacts of short-term rentals. And I think that's what council and some of the public wants to see, some kind of behavior. We don't want people who don't otherwise have a stakeholder interest in Port Colborne, they're only here for a weekend or a week, coming in and having an impact on the people who are permanent stakeholders, whether they're summer residents or year-round residents or businesses. So the chief's aware of that, and I'll bring back our lawyer, Ms. Premi from Sullivan Manny, and we'll talk about maybe engaging council and the public in some of the principles that will underlay those regulations, and then getting those regulations in place.
Counselor?
Just in response to that, thank you for that. So I know the answer to this, and I'm pretty confident in it, but Chief, while we're waiting to get the land use stuff right, and I agree, there's lots of municipalities that have done this. We don't have to, we're not the first, we don't have to reinvent something. There's some good examples out there, but are you confident we have enough bylaws, regulations in place at this time to react to what you've seen brought forward in bad actors in the short-term rental?
Chief?
Through the mayor to the councillor, I do believe we're in a fairly good place, and we have some added tools with the amps that we have been adding. We are intending on bringing some updated property standards, lot maintenance bylaws to council. I'm hoping by the end of May, which should hit within that time period, to give us a few little extra tools in our toolbox for enforcement during this coming season.
So I think that's important for the public to hear, that we're not just waiting on everything till next year. We've got some real good stuff in place to deal with bad actors. And I'll say it again, short-term rentals on their own are not evil. You know, I think we need them in our community, but the ideal thing is that your neighbor doesn't even know you're a short-term rental person, you know? Everybody acts like it's their neighborhood, not just because they have paid money, they can do whatever they want. So on that, I think I'm okay for now. And did I hear, Mr. Louis, you're going to bring something forward? I personally myself, I don't know that I need something immediately. If the lawyers and staff are working something out and you're not going to have it in place till next year anyways, you know, maybe just an update or something. I don't know that we got to get our high-priced lawyers in. Sorry, sir. You know, to give us just information, if you can relay it. It's totally up to staff, and if you keep us updated, that'd be great.
I can speak to that if that's okay. Through your worship to Councillor Bodner, I appreciate that, and unless I hear otherwise from someone else, maybe that's the path that'll sort of take. A staff report that says exactly what I've just said maybe isn't really worth sort of taking that room on the agenda, even though it's already there. But I'd like the chance to, I think the worst thing that can happen is we spend 14 months or 13 months or 10 months on a policy and a report and a procedure, and it misses the mark of what council and the public are sort of looking for. So once I caucus with Sarah, with legal, to sort of see what our path forward is time-wise, I want to make sure there's some check-ins with council to sort of get the principles in place that will guide this document. If it's a total lockdown and we bring down a Wild West open regime, we've missed the mark. You know, I think it might lay somewhere in between, presumably. But so let me do that, and even if it's a memo to council or a verbal, I'll make sure that we do that. But what I want to have is some public input, council input, probably before the end of the season, while seasonal residents are in the municipality and available to speak. Although now we have this online Zoom technology and so on, it's nice to get people in a room talking with staff about what they'd like to see, knowing that we won't be able to please everyone, but that we can hopefully get closer to the bullseye.
Okay, Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. This may be kind of a outside the box thinking, but since we're talking about having some more time, I'm wondering, in a world of shared services and trying to do things more efficiently, if we couldn't spend the time in maybe one legal brain and bill to look at perhaps adopting a short-term bylaw, stay bylaw, say along the lakeshore. So sit down and work with a Fort Erie, a Wainfleet, and us. If we could come up with some kind of bylaw that we all could agree with, does this also open up the opportunity for shared bylaw enforcement? So we all have these bylaw officers, but they can't cover 24 hours. But I don't know if they can cover 24 hours when you have more than one bylaw department set of officers. And maybe with the fullness of a year, we could see if, I mean, I think it would be great that, you know, you can't jump when you find out that Fort Erie is tough and we're the Wild West, and so everybody comes here. If you had a policy that was along this lakeshore, which, let's face it, that's one reason why a lot of people come down here, I think it's a great opportunity to work together and you know, cover more enforcement with the same amount of people. And so I don't know if that could be thrown into the mix.
CAO?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Bruno, I appreciate the insight. I think it's a noble idea that we should be able to partner with our neighbors, maybe get some uniformity in the applicability of the rules that we're going to put in place so that there isn't confusion. I mean, you talked about enforcement, but there's probably also owners who own property in more than one municipality who would want to see consistent application of whatever program is in place. So I will take a chance to talk to the CAOs in the other municipalities, Fort Erie and Wainfleet specifically. I think it is going to come down to principles. If our council, you know, sort of is welcoming of the practice in certain zones, but another municipality wants to lock it out, and maybe a third municipality wants to create a licensing regime for revenue reasons, we might all be working from a different sort of space. Let's not close the door yet. Let me work on it, and I'll bring something back to council when we're eventually at the right point in the process.
Thank you. Councillor Aquilin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Councillor Bruno stole my question as well.
He's reading your notes.
Yes. My thought process was the same, that, you know, we have 3 municipalities all along the lakeshore. I would assume that we have very similar complaints or concerns. You know, I think this would be an opportunity to collaborate and do best practices between all 3 municipalities if everybody's, you know, in compliance.
Great, thank you. Councillor Potter might know this, but like Fort Erie's done several or numerous changes to this over like 3, 4, maybe even 5 times they've changed this bylaws. They've moved through. So, you had a question?
Not on that, but another one. You asking me that question? The answer is no, I don't know.
Not on that? No, I thought maybe you did. But on this, any more on this one?
No, I'd like to go to another one now.
Yeah. Chief?
Just through you, Mayor to Council, I think the biggest thing to remember until we get whatever this bylaw is gonna look like is if somebody has a complaint, they have to notify us, and NRP or the after hours, they will come out. There'll be a record of that, and then from there, the city can enforce. But unless we know about it, it's very important that we get notified so that we can use our bylaws and possibly AMPS to enforce any issues that are happening.
Thanks. So you're asking a totally separate question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought maybe I still had something left on my council.
Well, no, because now we're under staff reports, but that's okay. Go ahead. Since you were last, I'll let you keep going.
I just wanted to understand. Reports, is anybody gonna talk about, making sure signage is on the road ends and everything with Nickel Beach being, you know, kind of unsure how many people are gonna be there? I just want that on, I know we talked about it at the ward meetings, I can't remember whether we're talking at the ward meeting about it or in
Steve?
open sessions, so.
Steve?
Sorry.
Yep, through you, your worship. So I can confirm that bylaw and road staff have already attended all of the road ends to make a list of any outstanding signage, and that will be planned to be remediated as soon as possible.
Great. Thank you, Counselor. So back to staff reports. Clerk's Department, anything? Chief?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, just want to let the community know that last year we introduced Clean Community Days. That's a day that people could come out, get rid of any household garbage within the neighborhood. We have set dates for this year. May 27th is a Saturday. It's going to be over at the Operations Center at 1 Kalele. If you want to know what you can drop off, what isn't accepted, if you go to the city's website, there's a good piece on the clean community, what can be dropped off, what can't be, and our hours of operation. If you do need a flyer, staff will be out at the farmers market the next couple Fridays, just to spread the news to make sure we get good attendance for that day. Second thing is, I just wanted to see if council has any appetite. Staff's been kind of looking at a vacant building registry, an issue that's really kind of raised its head to us over this winter, and we've kind of been looking at other municipalities that have a registry. Really puts the onus on the owner of the building to take care of that, and hopefully create a safer environment. It will also hopefully force those that are just hanging on to a building to maybe dispose of it to somebody that wants to repurpose that building and get the building within our community going again. So I was just wondering if council has any interest in that, and staff can bring something forward within the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you. What's the downside to, through you, Mr. Mayor, what's the downside to that? Is there any?
Chief?
Through the mayor, that's a great question. I never really thought about that. I'm going to say none right now, but I'm sure something will rear up, other than probably some people calling you upset that we're doing something like this.
Bring it on. I think it's a good idea.
Councillor Hoyle?
Will this be similar to what we see in St. Catharines have done?
That's what we're looking at. We want to maybe massage it a little bit so that maybe we're looking at square footage as the registration fee for that. We have some bigger buildings, some smaller buildings, and I think fees have to be geared to that square footage.
Councillor Dan? Oh, sorry. Councillor Danch?
Sorry, I just want to back up to the cleanup part there. Chief and I had a short conversation. I'd like to give them a couple hundred garbage bags, whether they're clear or green ones, to help you with your effort. I've always kind of promoted that each year. It kind of went nowhere, and hopefully I can just give you some bags. I think we're going to keep them at the station, and people can pick them up there, and hopefully we'll clean up our little community. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Elliott?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the chief. Yeah, I'm in support of the inventory. And we're going to look at commercial and residential, or just the commercial side?
Through the mayor to council, every building that's got a board on it's going to be part of that registry.
Okay, and I think this would lend to taking a look at the reduction in property taxes for vacant commercial buildings. Buildings that have sat empty for a number of months, years, that the owners get a reduction in their taxes because it's empty, when they really haven't tried to real hard rent them. It may give us an opportunity to review that, so look forward to that.
Chief?
Through the mayor to council, I mean, that is a Brian Bowles answer, but we actually were sitting in a meeting today discussing a few things back and forth, and that is something, I believe, not wanting to speak for Brian, but that his department is looking at.
Brian on that?
Yeah, just through the mayor to the councillor and council. So tax policy gets set at the Niagara region, and the Niagara region is well aware of this and taking a look at how we go about with this process, and we will be too. It has been reducing over a couple of years, so we can bring back some more information to council on it.
Go ahead.
Sorry, through you, Mayor, to Brian. I didn't realize that the region set our tax policy for reducing it on vacant buildings. That's not a municipal decision, that's theirs?
Brian?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, the swath of tax policy that comes out of the region is quite significant. Happy to walk you through a number of the items.
Got a week?
Got a night.
Yeah, there you go. Give Brian a call and you guys can set that up. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you. Ditto my fellow councilors. I'm all for this. I'm just wondering if by having the registry for your staff and even the just bylaw, but the fireside staff, does this allow then for everybody to know what those buildings are and you guys do a drive-by? In other words, I'm trying to be proactive rather than the resident have to call. If you have that list, would you be sort of monitoring them? And does the list lend to that?
Chief?
Through the mayor to council, we're actually trying to push that responsibility on to the owner of the property. St. Catharines, you can't quote me, but I believe it's every 2 weeks they actually have to go onto the registry, say that they visited their property on this day to ensure that it's secure. And that's that. The owner is the owner of the building, not us.
Definitely.
Okay. Councillor Baggett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess a double ditto for me. I think I brought this up about a year and a half or a couple of years ago. We talked about it a little bit, and I'll give you a perfect example. There's going to the market last summer, leaving to go back to my vehicle, and an empty building that's been empty for quite over a year. The windows were so dirty. There was graffiti written in the dust, and I've seen pictures and words, and I actually went and got a paper towel out of my SUV and came back and wiped it off. But this is something that, I'll still wipe it off tomorrow if it's there, but at least we have something, a program that, I know the owner of the building does not even care to rent it out or sell it. Just doesn't care. So, and there has been people interested in certain locations and that, and they're getting no callbacks at all from the owner of the property. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it, Mr. Mayor.
Good. Any further questions? Anything else, Chief? Mr. Shapowski, anything?
Yes, through your worship, I had a few items I wanted to update council and the public on. So I wanted to let everyone know that we have postponed the archaeological investigation on Sugarloaf Street, as we are still consulting with the Aboriginal communities. Once complete, we'll progress to informing the public of the revised timelines and then start the archaeological investigation. Secondly, late last year, Public Works informed council that we were going to be installing a speed cushion at H.H. Knoll Park. Unfortunately, the weather didn't turn out or hold out long enough for the installation, but the contractor has informed us that they're able to mobilize within the next month or so. So there will be a 3-day closure within the park's internal road system. One of the issues we may see is that we might have 2 overlapping closures in a very short distance from each other, but they're far enough away that we feel we can still move traffic with the appropriate amount of signage to not cause issues. So just a heads up that there will be a 3-day closure within the park's internal system, and that the archaeological work will be postponed shortly. And thirdly, in celebration of Earth Day, and in partnership with the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority and Sassafras Farms, we'll be giving away 400 trees to Port Colborne residents at a 3 per household limit. This will take place on Friday, April 21st, from 7 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. at King George Park during our weekly farmers market.
Type of trees, Steve?
There will be a mix of trees that are delivered from Sassafras Farms.
Good, thank you. Mr. Bowles? Oh, question to Steve? Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. You asked the one question I had because somebody's inquired to me already what the trees were. Will there be any, the folks that want them, will there be sort of a printout care and all that kind of stuff that comes when you hand out the trees?
Steve?
Yeah, through your worship. What we'll have is small little handouts. We'll also be collecting people's information because we do want to figure out the survival rate of each tree. So we would contact the residents in the future just to determine if the trees actually were successful and didn't have any die-off. So we do want to measure the quantities to make sure that the trees are successful and we're actually having a good success rate, so then we can adapt our plans in the future to suit those.
And one last one on that. So if you have 3 types of trees, somebody wants 3 trees, do they have to take one of each, or can they take a specific species?
We would do it so that they can take 3 as a whole, but it wouldn't be limited to per species.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Beggy?
Thank you, your worship. Question for Steve. You talk about a speed cushion at each additional park. And right now there's 2 speed bumps. What's the difference between a speed bump and a speed cushion? Is it a mattress or?
Designed if you ride your bike in there and fall, it cushions your fall. That's only for you, Councillor. Steve, go ahead.
Through you, your worship. So what we have out there right now are basically speed cushions. So speed bumps are very short and you feel that impact right away. Speed cushions are a little wider, not as impactful. So we are looking at using a speed cushion in that area. It'll also be a transitional period where you can go from the park, the actual playground equipment, over to the food vendor location. So we're using it in basically 2 different fashions, to slow traffic and also to move pedestrians from one side of the park to the other.
Okay. Mr. Bowles?
Thank you. Through the mayor to council, my updates on Nickel Beach. A couple, I guess, developments just to put forward to council. The first being, we have received an unsolicited offer, which we're reviewing as staff and look to bring forward to council at the next meeting. There is somebody that came forward that had an idea on how to move individuals from the parking lot to the beach by way of golf carts and the like. So that's interesting, and we'll bring that back to council to consider at the next meeting. We also, as we're going through with the parking lots, we've noted that it may be the right time to make some adjustments to the fence as you're coming into Nickel Beach. If you've gone down there, and I believe many councillors have recently, to check it out, you'll see that the barbed wire and all the likes, it's almost like it's non-existent. So to clean that up a little bit at the same time, staff is looking at doing that. We are working with Valet diligently with respect to parking in the area. At this point in time, and we'll have the full report at next council meeting, but we don't believe that for this season we will have that upper parking area that's right at the beach area. It is a complicated one. Valet's been a tremendous partner in trying to work through this, but as communicated before, there is a substation right there, which does add significant costs. This will bring the budget down significantly for the parking lots, and Valet's working with us to identify other property that we could use of theirs to be able to park cars. It may be all the more beneficial that this unsolicited offer to try to help move people around is something that we can talk to council with at the next council meeting. And we are planning, and we'll have that full conversation at the next council meeting with respect to finalizing the parking plan in the neighborhood. But right now, tentatively, April 29th is scheduled that we would go door-to-door knocking as staff to talk to people in the neighborhood to make sure they have a participate pass. So that's just a couple updates on the beach, and we're working on a full presentation to bring back to council to have more discussion at the next council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Planner, Ms. Landry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just have an update for council. There was a request at the last meeting to report back on the lighting of the communication towers and the requirements for maintaining the lighting. And also a request to maintain a list of our facilities in the city and a contact for all of the owners. So probably as council knows, the towers are federally regulated. We do have a process through the planning department that anyone coming forward to install a new tower is required to go through a consultation with the residents adjacent to the proposed towers. So within 120 meters, they have to send out a notice, and we hold a consultation with them to receive feedback. Then planning staff comes to council with our comments, and if council blesses them, we provide those comments to the applicant. But they're federally regulated and controlled, so for the most part, we don't have a lot of say in the location of the towers. In terms of the lighting of the towers, Councillor Bodner mentioned it, that a lot of them are remote, have remotes in them, and they're the indicators. So when the lights do go out, they do receive notice that they're out, and therefore they're able to react appropriately. If they don't have the remote indicators, then they have to observe physically the towers at least once every 24 hours to ensure that the lights are on. Also, they're required to do annual inspections on all of the lights on the poles. We also, staff have prepared a list of all of our facilities, at least the ones that have had to go through a planning process, and also a list of all of the owners of those facilities. We're just going through the process now of kind of scanning all the streets using aerial maps to make sure that we capture all of the towers, so the ones that have been existing for quite some time, and so that we have a contact for all of them. In the instance in the future, lights go out, we can send off a quick email or a phone call to the owner of those towers. So I just wanted to provide a bit of the update, as that was a request of council last meeting. That's everything.
Great, thank you. Okay, that's it for staff.
Ask a question.
Certainly can.
To Denise, just one quick question, or an ask. In the last couple of public meetings that we've had with regards to rezoning, and the proponents have asked for reductions in setbacks of a multitude of different things. And you always put down what the ask is, but you don't include in the report what our zoning bylaws requirements are. And that would help us understand how big is the ask, and kind of give it some context of, like in the application tonight, the size of the lot was going to 320 square meters, but it was reduced from 400, which is a significant reduction. But without the 400 there to give the 320 context, it just looks like, okay, it's just 320. Unless you go through the bylaw to research every setback that is required and then write it all down, it would be useful to have it included with the reports. And I just wondered if we could have that, so we could just look at it and understand what the ask is through them.
Ms. Lander?
So that's,
Sure, through the mayor to the councillor, 100%. We will definitely include that moving forward. So when the recommendation reports come forward, we will outline exactly what they're going from X meters to X meters.
Yeah.
And of course, with the public meetings, we will definitely outline that moving forward. And thank you for bringing that up into my attention.
and that may even help some of the public when they're looking at what the ask is, just to kind of justify and take a look at it, and maybe save them some questions too. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to our items. Item 8.1, is ice allocation procedure for youth groups, and the recommendation that Corporate Services Department Report 2023-71 be received. And that staff proceed with proposed changes to ice allocation and ice cancellation protocols as outlined in pages 2 and 3 of the Corporate Services Department Report 2023-71. If I can have Councillors Elliott and Bruno put that on the floor. And we have Mr. Thiel here tonight to give us an overview. Brian?
Yeah, I think it sort of outlined the overview in the report. The way we typically, historically have allocated ice has been through our sport affiliation process where we prioritize our users. Port Colborne children are always our first priority users, so we've done that historically, and in this proposed change would continue to do that. The two main changes in the report are with allocation and the separation of the boys and girls programs. So we would look to do those first two groups as our priority users. Included in those youth is also our AAA program, and then we would follow the list subsequent to that to fill in the remainder of our user groups. And then the secondary change with it is how we administer our cancellation policies. So historically, it's always been a 72-hour cancellation, so we would look to make some amendments there that are also outlined in the report. So I would certainly welcome any questions you may have.
Okay, we do have one delegation, so if we want to bring up the delegation, then we can go to questions after. That's all right. I got Mr. Ken Brittenbach from Youth Girls, or Port Colborne Girls Hockey Association, the WAVE. He's the interim president. Ken, how are you?
I'm good, Your Worship. How are you?
Good, thanks.
So, thank you for this opportunity, Your Worship, and the councillors and staff. My name is Ken Breitenbach. I'm the current president of the Port Colborne Girls Hockey Association, also known as the WAVE. My daughter Emily joined the club 6 years ago, and was shortly after the death of my dad, Ken Sr., who played with the Buffalo Sabres in the National Hockey League. My daughter Emily initially saw hockey as a way to honor his memory and continue his passion for the sport. She ended up staying with the club year after year because she found supportive and inclusive community that helped her grow physically and emotionally. We're here today to put on record how incredibly important it is this seemingly minor change in ice allocation policy is, not only to every member of the WAVE organization, but any person who appreciates the difference between equality and equity. We're here today, so for those who aren't familiar with our group, the WAVE is a nonprofit organization that was created 10 years ago by a few passionate parents who were looking for a positive space for their daughters to play competitive hockey. One of our founders, Councillor Tim Hoyle, our association's former president, is sitting amongst you. With support of the Port Colborne Minor Hockey Association, the WAVE emerged in 2013 as the city's first ever girls-only league based out of the Vail Centre. For many years, this collaboration flourished as the WAVE's membership swelled from a few dozen athletes to several hundred girls, with women ranging in the ages of 3 to 63. In the House League season that just ended, we supported junior and senior fundamentals programs, 2 under-11 teams, a U15 team, and a U22 team. In the beginning, the WAVE would schedule and book ice times through Port Minor Hockey, with few issues. But in recent years, however, the Girls Association has struggled to secure quality ice times that allow our athletes to fully participate in the sport that they love. We are optimistic that negotiating for blocks of ice directly with the city staff will mark an end to the 9 p.m. practices that are on school nights. Now we're getting to the part about equity and equality in sport and why it's important, not just for hockey, but our community and our country. Since the pandemic, an alarming number of girls, 1 in 4, are not returning to sport, according to a 2021 study that led by the Canadian Women in Sport. This is also on top of a previous research that showed 1 in 3 girls will drop out of sports by the time they reach adolescence, compared to 1 out of every 10 boys. Did you know that 62% of Canadian girls are not participating in any sport of any kind? We all need to care about these statistics because participation in sport is fundamentally linked to better physical and mental health and positions of leadership. Our athletes are living proof of this. They are members of their student councils, they're creative thinkers, strategic risk takers, they're warrant officers, they're university and college geared academics who are studying marketing, psychology, and kinesiology, just to name a few. The more girls we can recruit and keep on the ice benefits not just the Wave, but our society. We need your help to do that. We are grateful for our female athletes and have a home at the Vail Center, rooms of their very own. They can be prepared for the games free from feeling awkward and embarrassed, where they no longer have to change in a broom closet next to the Zamboni machine, where they're not part of the girls-only line while playing with a team made mostly of boys. It's hard to believe that just 11 years ago, this was the status quo. We are grateful for the volunteer coaches and trainers who donate time from their very busy schedules to help the girls develop their skills and game strategies. But our players need more. They need to know that their time and talent are valued in this city. They need and deserve fair, equitable access to ice. Equality means treating everyone the same way, regardless of their differences. So two hockey organizations of similar size getting the same amounts of ice time and access to equipment, coaches, and resources. That is equality. It sounds good, but it's not always the answer. Equity, on the other hand, means giving people what they need to succeed. Even if that means treating them differently, we know that late night and weekend ice times pose special challenges to an entire gender that is predisposed to leaving sports early in life. So let's change that so we can get them and keep them in the game. Equity means ensuring both genders have equal opportunities to access the most desirable ice times for practices, games, and other events. Hockey is a very special sport for girls. Under a helmet and layers of padding, the equipment actually serves more than our one important purpose. It protects players, but it also frees them. With hockey gear on, things like haircuts, waist sizes, clothing brands, none of that matters. You are judged not just for your skill, but your spirit and how you treat others. The sport allows girls to feel empowered, strong, and part of a team. We asked 4 of our founding players why they stayed on with the Wave for 10 years. Every one of them spoke of the importance of the friendships and the feeling that they were part of a community. We also heard they want the younger players to see that they could and should keep going. We support the city's recommendation that will allow us to book ice directly through the city for the 2023 and the 2024 season and beyond. We think it's high time the city introduce measures to track fair and equitable access to ice. We're happy to see measures in place with this new policy that will stop groups from hoarding ice and letting it go unused to the detriment of our community. We hope you do too. And when people ask you about the girls' sports in Port Colborne, tell them about the Wave. Share the YouTube clip of our athletes and coaching being featured on CBC's The National Newscast just earlier this year. Send them to Harmony and West to buy a special edition of a Wave soap bar, an exciting new collaboration with local businesses that sees the majority of proceeds from the sales benefiting girls hockey in Port Colborne. Let them know that we are the future of women's hockey and that we are not just developing athletes, we're shaping leaders. Thank you again, city staff, councillors, Mayor Bill Steele, for giving us a voice and helping us make waves in girls hockey in Port Colborne. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Any questions? Good. Thanks. I know Councillor Hoyle as well as myself are very proud that when we were part of Port Colborne Minor Hockey, when we started the Wave, how many years has it been now, Tim?
This will be coming up, it'll be our 10th year.
10 years ago when we, one team. Quickly went to about 4 and now we've got, as Ken mentioned, lots. So this has grown, things have changed. We were lucky in the day when Tim and I were involved, we had Lyndon Isley as the scheduler of minor hockey in Port Colborne for Port Colborne Minor Hockey, which was boys and girls, and then the Wave came along and then we merged and took over the AAA system with 8 other municipalities within southern Niagara. So Linda was very good at the time. Things do change, and I'm glad to see that Brian and his staff have put this together, and that we've got a group out here tonight that are working well with our staff and to move forward with this important endeavor, because believe me, other than playing up until the Mayor's Cup this year, I coached before I even had kids, when I had kids, and after my kids got out of hockey. So, I mean, my involvement in Port Colborne Minor Hockey has been around for 40 plus years. So it's been a lot of fun over the time. So thank you, Brian, for this. Any questions to Brian on this today? Dave? Councilor Elliott?
Yeah, just a couple, and to echo Ken's sentiments, I'm a hockey guy. It was the only thing I was good at when I was young and played in St. Catharines. grew up playing. Question I'm gonna ask Brian relates to that. But hockey, from my perspective and from a lot of others, like the mayor's, hockey is for everybody, for everybody. To me, it's the greatest sport, and when you talk about the camaraderie in the dressing room, I truly believe that hockey is a sport where the friends you make when you're young, you keep till you're old like me. I was gonna say us, but I'll say me. And it's just like you pick up conversations like you were just there a couple years ago. So yeah, wholeheartedly agree with the equitable and treatment and ice time. So my question to Brian parlays off of that. Obviously, we're getting busier at the ice renting level. Where are we in percentage of usage of the ice times that we have? Are we at 100%? Are we at 90, 75? You got a ballpark figure?
Brian?
Through your mayor to Councilor Elliott, our prime time ice, which is 5 to 10 in the evenings, and then obviously all of Saturday and all of Sunday, we're around 90% allocation of that prime ice time. So consideration of moving times to earlier mornings or potentially displacing some adult groups, that would occur if we had a situation where it was 100% or if we had a waiting list. So we're confident that we can fit all our user groups in currently with the numbers that we have, including our youth programs, boys and girls, our sledge hockey, and our adult user groups. That could change down the road as stated in the report with some population growth or potential increase in the membership of some of those programs. But currently, there's enough ice for everybody, so we'll certainly ensure and take over the allocation of the times to ensure that there's equity there.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you. Through Mayor, because that's where I was going when I take a look at how much ice we have and the equitable distribution of it. I grew up in a time, and I'm sure the mayor did too, where you kind of had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go for 5:45 ice, and you were lucky if you got the 6:45 to 7:45 time because you got to sleep in an extra hour, and then coach through that as well. So when I look at ice rentals, I look at the full spectrum of, are we using all the hours that we have available? Because if you take the 7 days at 2 rinks at 2 hours each in the morning, 4 hours, 7 days, it's 28 hours extra rental that we could have available. And I know that sounds terrible to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning for practice, but sometimes that's all that's available. And while it sounds bad, if you want to rent out to get to that 100%, as we grow as a city, we may have to take a look at that. So I didn't know whether or not we were there, because I know that there are some centers that do use the early morning as extra ice time. So it's good to see that we're getting busier with ice rentals, and we should only get more busy as we grow as a community. So I like that, but careful what you ask for in being the one that allocates the ice, because good luck to you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had a conversation earlier today. I think this is it's super initiative, probably well overdue. I'm very supportive. I was wondering, though, if the user groups have agreed to some kind of formula or matrix as to how you will divvy that out. So we all support the principle, but then we get down to the nitty gritty and people are in the room. Is there sort of an understanding of how that matrix or allocation will work?
Brian?
Yeah, through you, Mayor, to Councillor Bruno. There sort of the asks from the WAVE did come through the Treasurer's office, and then I received late this afternoon a similar email with some of those asks. And we have had conversations with all the groups affected. And so not only are they aware of the pending changes, considering things get approved tonight, but also some of the asks from the WAVE to ensure some of that equity. So they're not only aware, but are also receptive. So I, again, don't foresee an issue with that. Having said that, once we go through the allocation and get the final numbers from all the groups affected, if there was an issue, we could certainly come back to council and address that at the time.
Councillor?
So you're not at the end, if there's a disagreement, judge and jury will see that back with some recommendations if there's not agreement?
if that were to happen, yes, but again, I don't foresee that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Baggett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions. First of all, thank you, Ken. Very, very good presentation. Appreciate it. Are we going to be using our existing staff for scheduling? There's no new staff involved or less staff. It stays the same? Okay, thank you. And my other question, I guess, I'm a very big proponent of the wave. It wasn't there when I was involved in minor hockey, but I still remember Cassandra Payot, the goaltender. We developed a Park Colborne, and she was 10 years old playing against 15-year-olds in Niagara Falls as a goaltender. And she was like, well, this high, and she did a great job. If there's an expansion with either, say the wave gets into a traveling team scenario eventually, would that have the same reflection? Like come playoff time, I guess in minor hockey is the same thing. If you get beat out in playoffs, you cancel your ice time because you had a game scheduled the next day, but you got beat out of the series. There is some sort of leniency in there. You don't get nailed for cancellation of ice time, I'm gathering.
Ryan?
Through the Mayor to Councillor Baggett, correct. That scenario is sort of just the end of season. So they're planning and scheduling for the entire season, goes on a monthly basis where they would know that well in advance of what it looks like. If you're talking about getting beat out of the playoffs, that would be sort of the end of season thing, and that would end your permit. And I guess sort of to your point about a potential expansion with a travel program, if that were to happen for any of our associations, the Wave included, they would still fall under the first priority user as our youth Port Colborne group. So they would get first priority of ice use.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Further questions? All in favor? Carry unanimously. Thanks, folks. No, you don't. Item 8.2, Canal Days Marine Heritage Festival 2022 results and 2023 updates. Recommendation that Corporate Services Department Report 2023-70 be received for information. I have Councillors Elliott and Bruno moving that. Councillor Elliott, or sorry, you're just here to answer questions, right? You don't have a presentation. Yeah. Yep. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few questions on the budget because numbers jump off the page at me, so bear with me. Just going through it. With the budget to actual report, on the second line of the report, it says advertising and donations. And the 2022 budget for donations is 0. But we've got historical data that would give us something to go on. And I just wonder why that line is blank when we didn't budget for donations.
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, it was a combined budget, and then we broke it out for actuals, so that way we could actually just see it, and on a go-forward basis, we want to break out the budget versus donations versus sponsorships. That's what we wrote there. You really have to combine the budget and combine the actuals to do the comparison, because when you compare the actuals of advertising and donations to the budget of advertising and donations together, you get to the same number. It was budgeted as one block.
Okay, so the donations at the $27,051, is that the gate at the concerts and everything included?
Yeah, the majority of that is gate at the concert, through the mayor to the councilor.
Sorry. Yep, through you, so, okay. That was one thing. Going forward, will we have comparison from previous years listed in partnership with this so that we can see this is what we did last year, this is what we did this year, to see how we're trending? Because on a standalone, it's kind of like what I asked for planning. If you don't see what you had and what you did prior to and what you're doing now, how do you balance off the budget and see which way that the event is trending? So I just wondered if we're going to do that going forward.
So through the mayor to the councilor and council. So what is nice about this particular event is we do have the working group, and there's some councilors that sit on the working group, so we kind of have that back and forth. And when we set the 2022 budget, we were able to talk about, I guess it was the 2019 canal days that we were kind of comparing against at the time. But on a go-forward basis, we will have, like, this is published documents. We can include it on a side-by-side as best we can within the financial workings of the accounting system.
Counselor?
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Through you, like, Brian, when you came up, I wasn't expecting you to come up. I was thinking I get to have a go at Brian, so I apologize for that if I talk to him. So it says down below, purchase a fence for $16,000 and tents for $15,000 with a 3 to 4 year payback. So we purchased those, but the equipment rental price didn't change. So if we bought the fence and the tents, shouldn't we have a reduction in what the rental monies were?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councilor, as that program went out, we didn't actually buy the tents until, we didn't actually buy the fence until after Canal Day, because we got a good deal on it.
Okay.
And then the tents was a whole new system. If council will remember, there historically, I think, was a question with the downtown BIA and how involved they were with some of the Canal Days. So what we worked with the downtown BIA was to create the artisan group, and that was, I think, a really big success. We got a lot of positive comments with respect to that, and that's what the tents were for. And we also, what was kind of nice, because we got to see the tents over at Lock 8 for when we had the opening of the lock. So the tents are inadvertently actually even giving the city a little extra ability, and we're going to get paid back with that BIA sponsorship over the next couple of years.
Okay. 2 more quick questions. Program supplies, that line, it appears like it's a catch-all. We expensed $433,901, but it's just program supplies. What does that capture?
Brian?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councilor, that includes a lot with respect, right? And maybe we could break it out if council wants to see. When we talk to the committee, we talk about what the budget is for the musicians, which is by far the largest component of that. And that's where you can see the TPN contract above. And we got a special grant from the province because we were reopening, and that's how we were able to afford and adjust to kind of stay within budget, but still have that kind of exceptional experience at the 2022 Canal Days, bring in the extra bands.
Okay, and then go up to the top of the expense line, the first 2, I guess 3 lines, comms and public relations, contract services, cost of goods sold. All of them were overspent, and it was, the reasoning was impact of meeting grant requirements and getting the word out coming out of COVID, driven by security and additional COVID planning?
Yeah, so through the mayor to the councilor, we did some of the, I guess, COVID funding that we received, we were able to apply against this because we had a significant increase in security. We knew there was a lot of people coming in. The signage was adjusted because we knew with everybody coming in and COVID still on, we were worried about people communicating at the very least that people should keep their distance, and masks would be available. And we actually had masks available at the finance tent or at the beverage tents people could pick up. So there was a number of safeguards put in place for those to make sure everybody felt comfortable at the event. And we did receive a little bit of funding that we were able to offset some of those costs. But you won't see that differential because as of right now, as we said in the 2023 budget, we didn't plan to change or continue on with that kind of COVID protocol coming into 2023 right now. So if things were to evolve and we needed to, we would be talking about adjustments to that budget.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Sorry for all that, because Canal Days is one of those things that everybody wants to talk about. So when I took a cursory glance at the numbers, it was like a couple of flashing lights go off and it's like, ask about this, just so when you get stopped in the street about where'd you spend all the money at Canal Days, I've got something to relate to people, so thank you for that.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, and without rehearsal, thank you, Dave, because that just segues your last sentence into what I wanted to talk about. So I always look forward to this report because I hear all that stuff in the grocery store and on the street and how much money this costs and what a waste and what a good thing and all that kind of stuff for 40 years. And so at the end of the day, I wanted, Mr. Bowles, I'm sorry, Amy, this is a financial question. And hopefully the media is listening and this becomes part of the story on Canal Days. So my interpretation of this total cost is that it's $220,000 roughly, and 061 to be exact. And if I remember from budget, I think that's around 1% of the levy, Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, as always, you are right on with that calculation.
And so if I remember correctly, is that approximately $20 per household? Because I asked that question at budget for you to put down what 1% means on the levy, and I think I'm close to that.
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor and council, that is correct. So it would work out to about $20 per household to run Canal Days.
Thank you, because I think that's the thing we ought to hold when people ask the question, that this is costing a household $20 for all that goodwill, all the promotion of the city, all the historical significance, all the spin-off to merchants, not $100 a person, not $1,000 a household, $20. And I'm wondering if, and the word was mentioned earlier tonight, I think again by Councillor Elliott, context. And so I'm wondering, because we, if it's 1%, and if we think this is somewhat of a normal year, not for tonight, but would it be appropriate to talk about spending 1% net of our budget on Canal Days? And the reason I mention that, or less, is that at some point, inflation is your friend and not your friend. So when you have to raise the price of beer, or when somebody makes 45 cents more an hour, there's a cost to be paid. And I'm wondering if to take away the mystery or mystique or inaccurate conjecture on that, if perhaps that's something we ought to look at as what we intend to spend, always with the recognition that we'd like to beat that target, and that getting it to zero is the goal, but accepting that 1% is not the end of the world and should cause a re-examination. I see a few councillors nodding. Again, not for tonight, but I think clarity, transparency, and facts always win the day. So thank you, Mr. Bowles, for the report. Thank you, Amy, and good luck on next year.
Thank you, Councillor. Further questions? Councillor Baggio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You're okay, Amy. Working overtime for nothing, eh? I do want to thank staff for bringing this up. Transparency, very important. The last running for council, a few knock on the doors, and everybody asks about Canal Days, and I guess this is for the CAO. Historically, is Canal Days supposed to make a profit, or is it? Perhaps you can explain. You explained in the last meeting we had, and you had a really good explanation on the purpose of Canal Days, what it's for, representing our city.
Mr. CAO.
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Baggio. Now I feel the pressure's on me to recreate that explanation from the past. And I think it's different things to different folks on council and in the community and on staff. And even, when I say in the community, that's segmented further into businesses and residential. Some of the businesses that are here, I remember, it's not there anymore, years and years ago, Empty Bellies was down at where the Galley restaurant was, and now that's gone too. And they were a seasonal business, and they, I presume, made enough money just through the summertime, and not all of which was Canal Days, but including Canal Days, that, that to sort of carry them through the winters and so on. We talk about Canal Days at the staff level. We talk about it as a chance to sort of boost our community or show our community externally. I have seen people, it's kind of an anecdote, and it's kind of got a bit of a mystique to it, but it's true. It's a fact that I've had people come up to me and say on Canal Days, this is Canal Days? Like, this is Port Colborne? I've never seen it before, and I'll be back. Like, now I'll be back in October to go to Smokin' Buddha, or I'll be back in, a different day to go to the Breakwall or Canal Side, or some of the nice stores we have, like Grant's Gifts and so on, the clothing stores, 270 Degrees West. The parks and facilities we have, like Lock 8 and H.H. Knoll and others. So it's really a chance to shine externally. But then another side of that same coin is it's a day for community pride. I always go down, I think it's Kent Street. There's a house there, and there's a pickup truck out front, and they have a liner in the bed of the pickup truck, and it's full of water, and there's kids in the pool that's made by the bed of the truck. And I always imagine, I guess one day I should maybe stop and talk. I imagine that they're visiting from out of town, and this is a chance to come back to Port Colborne, whether you lived here in the past and you're having a bit of a family reunion, or whether you're just a frequent visitor who has friends here who didn't live here. So I think it's all those things at once. Canal Days is an economic development initiative. It's a tourism and recreation initiative. It's a celebration of Port Colborne, concerts and the museum and the library and the good things that go on there. It's a chance to eat street food, which I am guilty of most years, more than I should. I've worked here for about 8 or 9 years, and I've never had anyone from a policy perspective, council or staff, say that there's a company line when it comes to profitability or subsidization or full cost recovery. There are staff at Canal Days, city staff working. Some of them are volunteering their time and not being paid. Some of them have an arrangement where we change their shift from Monday to Tuesday. Monday and Tuesday we say stay home and don't be paid, and come in on Saturday and Sunday, and those will be your new regular shift. And it's a fact that some people are working in addition to their regular shifts, and it's overtime and it's paid at a premium. But all of those things come together in the budget and in our operations to make sure that there's just enough people to keep the keep the city safe. We need folks who are there making sure that no one's tripping over wires, or that our electrical contractors are, setting up the concert properly, and to keep our city clean. And one of the things that I always hear is that you can't believe at Saturday morning that there was a whole festival here on Friday. You can't believe on Sunday morning that we're 2 days into a festival because of the clean city. And that's nothing that I can take credit for. That's something that the different workers here in the Parks Department and the students we get and some of their bosses have to take the credit for. So I don't know if that's too long of an answer, or if I was avoiding an answer, but there's never been a true council direction around full cost recovery or subsidy. There is always staff working on grants, always working on sponsorship, and always working on user fees. For example, that lemonade stand paying a fee to be in Canal Days. So for those reasons, and selling, we sell products at the concerts and so on, food and drink, and we seek donations from concert goers. So we're always working to offset costs, but no policy direction. And that's something that council could do. We talked a little bit in the working group about some kind of a visioning session, and maybe, we're out of the gates here for 2023, but maybe sub or post 2023, and I'm looking at Amy Duffy nodding towards me. Maybe we have some kind of a debrief and a visioning session so that we can keep our festival fresh and thriving years into the future. I feel like I said a lot, and I'll stop there unless there's a follow-up question.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. Counselor?
Thank you very much for the explanation. You know, to be 100% honest with you, before I became a counselor, we used to leave town during canal days quite a bit. Because the traffic, living on Charlotte Street, the parking was horrendous, and we take off up north a little bit, and it was busy up there too. But since being on council, I do understand the importance of showcasing our city. And for $20 a resident household thing, you can't be coming to Park Colborne for canal days. So I will volunteer again, Mr. Mayor, for the canal days. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilor Beauregard.
Through your worship to CA Louis. Just looking at the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, it is a recommendation in there that we do have a strategic planning session. And it's something that would be beneficial, I think, to council and the municipality.
Thank you, Councilor.
I don't need to.
Yep.
It's fine.
Yep. Councilor?
Just to tap into what Scott said, I go far every day. And just to show you the reach that the city has, I'm in Milton one day, and a woman says to me, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Port Colborne." She says, "Nickel Beach." And I kind of looked at her like, "You know Nickel Beach?" "Oh yeah, we go down there all the time." I'm in Whitby, and the guy that I deal with says, "You guys are from Port Colborne, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He says, "Oh, Sherkston's fabulous. Got a trailer there. Love to go there. Love the city." And I'm in Georgina, if anybody knows where Georgina is, talking to a couple of guys, and they're like, "Where are you from?" I said, "Port Colborne." "You guys got some of the best fishing on the Great Lakes." So I got three completely different areas that are talking about three completely different things. And it always shocks me that, "You know where Port Colborne is?" And they all say, "Yeah." And it's a great town. And I know that's pumping our tires. But it never fails that how do you even know where we are? And three different activities have brought them to town. So we're doing something right. And as far as Canal Days, everybody knows Canal Days. Everybody knows Port Colborne and Canal Days. So I mean, that's kind of the thing. But it just shocked me that people spread across the province know us for three different things, and that name comes up. They could have said, we go to Toronto, we go here, we go there. No, they come here. So, yeah, we're doing something right, and to get our name out, there's always that argument, right? Canal Day's wasting money. But you bring people in, you introduce them to town, people come back and spend money in town. So we got to do something to get them here, and that's just one of the things that we offer. So, yeah, you want to put it on the levy? Maybe we do have a conversation about that. So, just my two thoughts.
Thank you, Councilor. Seeing no further arms up, all those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Oops. 8.3. Council and Committee Travel Expense Policy. Recommendation that Chief Administrative Office Report 2023-17 be received, and that bylaw 4896-121-06 and any amendments thereto be repealed. Mr. Louis.
Sure, through your worship to council, I know
Oh,
that...
hold it. I've got Councilors Bruno and Aquilina moving it. Now,
Yes.
Mr. Louis.
I know that those two council members, I believe those two council members had interest in discussing the report. I did want to identify a change to the draft policy that's attached before we get there. And a caller brought to my attention the fact that under section 5.1 elected officials, it would appear, I think what was intended to end up in the policy and what actually ended up are two different things. It would appear that council members can only go to the annual conference for AMO, FCM, Good Roads, and ROMA, Rural Ontario Municipalities Association, and not others. The intention was to state a municipal preference or a corporate preference that someone goes to those for, but that really any association or event that's relevant to the person's duties as a councillor would be acceptable under the policy or authorized under the policy, including, say, for example, Ontario Association of Committee of Adjustment secretary treasurers are members. Great Lakes, St. Lawrence Seaways, there's a lot of associations that we either belong to as a municipality or individual members that are totally appropriate. So the wording that will go forward if this is approved is, I'll just scan through this, not verbatim, but very quickly. Any member of council is authorized to attend one conference, trade show, convention, or similar event that is relevant to his or her duties as an elected official in the city. And then the next paragraph, the city is a member of a number of municipal associations, including those ones I mentioned, AMO, FCM, OGRA, Roma. It is customary for the city to have representation at these organizations' annual conferences from staff and council. It is also appropriate for delegates to attend other training seminars throughout the year. And then it says that the mayor may attend more than one conference at his or her discretion, but that before claiming a second one, the mayor should be reimbursed by the region as a regional councillor, which was already in the existing draft policy and the city's policies. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions on the report.
Yep, I've got Councillor Bruno and then Councillor Aquilina.
Thank you, Worship. My question's been answered.
Councillor Aquilina?
Thank you, Your Worship. I apologize. I looked at this only because I have a background in doing travel policies, so my questions may be answered through other things, but I'm not familiar with them. So when you were talking about per diem, where would I find what the per diem is?
Through your worship to Councillor Aquilina, there is also a staff policy that exists, and there are also annual forms. So every year, the staff, the accounting staff of the city create new templates for mileage, expense reimbursement, per diem for travel, reimbursement for tuition in courses, and for ones that are regulated by either inflation or an outside agency like Canada Revenue Agency for mileage, they automatically update to the latest annual rates. So for example, I have some council members going to conferences over the next month or two, and they'll get, when they come back, a form, and the form will have the per diem rate on it. I can tell you it's around 100 and, I don't have it right in front of me,
That's okay.
around $105 or $110. And the reason it's such a random amount is because it was probably 75 or 100 and went up 2% or 3%, whatever cost of living was. And that is split between, if this isn't mentioned in the policy, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and incidentals. And if any meal, and I say this mostly for the folks who haven't read the report, who are watching on YouTube, any meal that's provided by the conference is deducted. You don't get paid twice for the same meal.
Correct. Okay. So my next question was about how you determine the rates, but you've kind of answered that. Is there, in the city policy, is there like restrictions around times? So for example, if I'm leaving to go to a conference and I leave at 11 o'clock, I can't claim a breakfast, or if I come back at 4 o'clock, I can't claim a dinner. Are those in the city policy as well?
Yep, and through your worship to Councillor Aquilina, I just want to go back on one thing you said. The rates that we have arrived at are determined in that way, but there is a part that's difficult to administer. Sometimes if you're in like St. Catharines or Kingston or, you know, a smaller city, London, you know, a hamburger or a pasta dinner is a lot cheaper than if you're in Montreal or Toronto, and the policy doesn't really, neither policy really accounts for that. So maybe that's something we can look at in the future, is sort of where the destination is. On your second question there, it is a sliding scale based on the time of departure from the house or the time that you leave to come back to your house. So if you would be home for 2 meals at your house because you left Toronto, if that was where it was, at 9 in the morning, you're home for lunch, you're home for dinner, that's the sliding scale is reduced on the travel day out and the travel day back.
Okay. And I from reading it, I gather that if we're within 100-kilometer radius of City Hall, that we don't claim meals, correct? Like, it's outside of that 100-kilometer radius?
I think that's accommodations. I think that's overnight
Just- okay,
accommodations.
just
And I think the thought process there was, you know, if the Rose City Best Western Suites was ever to host the Ontario Association Committee of Adjustment Secretary Treasurers, that presumably you could drive home back and forth. You know, there's some conferences at White Oaks, places in Niagara Falls, Hamilton, and it's kind of on the borderline. We also want any delegate, whether it's a staff person or a council member, to make the safest decision. You know, if you've been in conferences all day and you know, you haven't slept and you're driving home at dark,
Right.
maybe it's not the best. But anything within a local driving distance, a certain radius, we don't pay for accommodations. We will pay for meals only when they're not included in the registration.
And no incidentals, I would assume.
Right.
Right? Okay. And then, so when in my day job, when I'm doing like a travel claim or planning a travel event, we have kind of like a portal that has standard like hotel rates, air rates, like air travel, rail travel and all that. Is there something for provincial municipalities that has the same thing, or are we kind of taking into account, you know, we're trying to find the most economical way to get to the destination?
I think that's a really good question. Through your worship to Councillor Aquilina again, I'm going to admit that I think you got me where I don't know if we've ever considered that, and I'll tell you why. 99.9% of the travel that historically has been for conferences that are prearranged. So, for example, FCM is at Toronto this year. 3 council members typically go. This year, 3 are going again. And we get, there's a housing registry for the FCM conference that stands for Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And you book through that registry, so the price is fixed. But I think what you're describing is a scenario where, imagine, you know, the Prime Minister called Mayor Steele and said, I want you to come to Ottawa, we're going to have a meeting. And there was no booking portal. What would stop the mayor from getting the presidential suite in the Fairmont Hotel, you know, as opposed to Les Suites way down a long walk from the municipality. So I think what probably is appropriate is for me to put something in here that says when the conference isn't providing a hotel booking registry, that the most economical means of travel will be, well, and I think, and I'd like to talk to the treasurer about this before it's final, because one thing we do talk about is flights. We have booked some, not, you know, most conferences are a drive, but from time to time the mayor's had a flight or something. And sometimes the cheapest flight isn't the best, because then you have to pay for a bag, and then you have to, if you cancel for any reason, the cheapest flight is non-refundable. But the next flight up, he's already got his hand up, he's going to help me out. The next flight up is sometimes $50 more, but comes with more than $50 worth of things. I don't know if he wants to the treasurer wants to step in on that.
And we don't get $6,000 rooms a night like the Prime Minister did. So. I want everybody to know that. We don't do that at the City of Port Colborne. Go ahead.
Through the mayor to the councillor and council, when in the policy, I think what a CEO said is bang on. So the policies are designed to be economical and practical instead of being overly prescriptive, because it does give those that are going to these sessions the opportunity to make an itinerary that services and supports them. And I think when you read the policy, maybe that should have been at the very beginning, but it is embedded, interestingly enough. We did like 7.3, it specifically says the economical and practical means of transportation. So I think it's implied at the detailed level. Not even implied, it's actually there. It's technically fully there in the detailed level. But maybe as this gets adjusted and evolves over time, it could move up as a core principle.
Yeah, or just, I'm assuming if, like what the CAO is saying, if there's a flight that might be a higher price, but there's reasons behind that, or, you know, if that's the time frame that you have to take, is it just that we submit some sort of justification to rationalize the difference in pricing, or like, is that an expectation of a comparison?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councilor and council, it's a great question, and I think the mechanism to which it is, the policy is put forward that somebody, when they're submitting their expenses, are saying and signing off that they have found the most economical and practical component for them. We aren't asking council, just like we don't ask staff, to give 3 quotes of different airfare in that, because everybody's situation is going to be a little different, and everybody is sworn the oath or are accustomed to our policies for ethical behavior, etc. So we've relied on that higher principle to allow council to have the leeway to make that call. It may be that somebody has to pay an extra $50 or $100 because taking the late flight is not a practical, because they have to get home for a family situation, right? So it would be very hard to make it overly prescriptive there, but it definitely, the goal is that everybody's situation might be different, so it would have to be assessed in everybody's individually.
Okay. And then the last thing is, in the document, it mentions the city mileage reimbursement policies, and so where would I find that?
Sure. And through your worship to Councillor Aquilina, we do have a staff and council policy. I can probably make sure through clerks that maybe it's deposited in council's directory, because that's something that you would want access to. But I can tell you our policy is the same as most municipalities that I know of anyway, and government agencies, and it is that we will pay to the maximum CRA taxable benefit rate. It's like the number of kilometers before it becomes a taxable benefit. And I see a treasurer's hand again to help me.
Brian? Through the mayor to the councilor and council, we use this this model at the National Joint Council, and it might be easy to also, we could send out that website just so you can stay current. So every year, the finance staff look at that and update it, and truth be told, there has been times that has moved up before we've moved up ours, but once it's identified, we move it up to that, and that's what most public sector organizations are referencing.
Sure. And I guess through your worship to Councillor Aquilina, but really to all of council, we talked a lot about, in orientation about policies and bylaws and resolutions, and I don't know if we talked about some of these practical things, and the simple fact is we used to have Nancy and now we have Gail, and Gail is the person who will help you if you come back with, always save your receipts, hotel room especially, but all your receipts. Your meals are kind of, so the plan isn't, buy your breakfast at the diner and buy your lunch at the coffee shop and buy your dinner at the keg or whatever. The plan is you get $100 and whatever the number is this year, $12 a day. You can go to the keg if you want. You go to the keg for all 3 meals, but you spend more than $112. Or you might just get a little sandwich from Tim Hortons, and you might spend a lot less than $112. But Gail will help you with your forms. Likewise for mileage, if you are doing any travel for city purposes, if you're going to the State of the Region address tomorrow that Chair Bradley does, log your mileage, put it on this form. This form automatically calculates, based on the new rate, or the 2023 rate, and the HST and everything, how much mileage you're entitled to, and Gail will make sure that you get reimbursed for that. I know a lot of folks sort of sometimes take one for the team, and I'm not going to worry about my mileage, but it really shouldn't cost you money to fulfill your duties. And I say that not just to Councillor Aquilina, but to all of you. And I see another hand.
Brad? Sorry, through the mayor to council, just if I give one practical tip, when you do have a receipt, take a picture of it. We are set up to be able to take everything electronically, so you can even email it to Gail, but it's also very helpful if you do have to go somewhere. It's very easy to lose a receipt, and we don't get the HST back if we don't have the actual receipt. So if you are somewhere, taking a quick picture with your phone can be a helpful way just to keep the process going.
Counselor?
No, I'm
All
good.
set?
Yep, thank you.
Counselor Beauregard?
Your worship to C.L. Louis. Just off of Councillor Aquilina's points, could we maybe create an appendix to the policy that has the per diem rate and the other policies? Because then it'd be easily, you could easily reference it. But to my main question that I want to ask, so I see here that for any counselor that were to take a course, that they would be required to make payment upon successful completion of the course. Sorry, they wouldn't make payment. They would get their expenses paid for upon successful completion. Some courses may take a significant amount of time to complete, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. I can understand this maybe if it was like a course that's a week, but to pay is like a $600 cost and have to wait 4 or 5 months to get reimbursed kind of seems a little long in my opinion.
So through your worship, Councillor Beauregard, noted on the first item. On the second item, I think that maybe there's some wiggle room here to write something where, I mean, and we have this in our employee staff training policies, where if something is cost prohibitive, a bunch of courses are $200 or $300 or $400, just kind of a sweet spot there. But sometimes a course is $2,000 for a university level, public administration or politics course. Sometimes, maybe I'm dating myself here, like first aid or something is $25. So the amount that a person can be expected to carry is kind of, fluid. But we do allow staff to apply to have something prepaid rather than paid upon completion if the cost is if the cost is so much that you'd be taking, like food off your family's table while you're waiting for your grade to come in. Maybe we can do the same thing with this. I don't think council members are going anywhere. I mean, we've got you for 4 years. We know where to find you. So I think I'll note that and I'll make an adjustment to this policy. I think that it would be okay to approve the policy and just have me change and make a notation after. And I think I like the idea of getting the entire policy as well as the forms in council's Dropbox type folder. I can't remember if it's SharePoint folder.
Okay. Further questions? All in favor? That's carried. Item 8.4 is the sale of surplus property, PIN 64156-0026, Elm Street Hydro Corridor. Recommendation that Chief Administrative Officer Report 2023-64 be received. The council approve entering into an agreement of purchase and sale with 13489-116 Canada Inc. regarding the vacant city-owned property on Elm Street between Elm and Catherine. That a bylaw to authorize entering into an agreement of purchase and sale with 13489-116 Canada Inc. regarding the sale of a city-owned lot on Elm Street, legally described as lots 29, 30, and 31, part lots 41, 42, and 43, Plan 861 being PTS 4 and 6 on 59R 9034. Port Colborne be brought forward that the mayor and acting clerk, city clerk, be authorized to sign and execute any and all documents respecting the sale of these lands. I have Councillors Bagu and Danch to move that. Councillor Bagu, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate it. I have no problem with the sale of the property, but we did discuss earlier regarding Chandler Lane, the lane that goes in between Catherine and Elm Street, how by selling this property, this lane would not be accessible to that property. Can I just get verification on that?
Mr. Cotton?
Only because it's only a one-lane, and the developer, whoever's developing the property, should not rely on that laneway.
Mr. Cotton?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bagu and to Council, that lane is not part of the development at all, so it would stay as it is. It wouldn't be a through lane from the parking lot through Chandler. There would be no access from the parking lot through to Chandler.
Councillor?
Right, so I guess it's telling the developer that laneway is not accessible from his property. I guess that's the easiest way to say. Like for bicycles, maybe, if whatever he develops there, but you see where I'm getting at. If the developer wants to use Chandler Lane, I just think the people that live the backyards on it should be consulted with. Because these people are not even aware we're selling this property right now, tonight. So it's something that's gonna come, a question tomorrow morning to Councilor Elliott or myself.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bagu and Council, that would be something that would come up in the planning and the pre-consultation that goes in, and the planning department and engineering would stop that. There wouldn't be a way to get, there wouldn't be an accessible way for cars to go through that lane. And I can tell you, just speaking to the developer and seeing their general concepts, that was not incorporated at all into their plans. It was lane basically set that the property would end. There wouldn't be access for cars through there. That's not part of the plan at all.
I understand. I thank you for that comment, but I know sometimes plans change. It happens with this municipality every day. But I just wanted to speak up on it to make you aware and planning aware of the impact it could have. Thank you.
Okay, further questions? Councilor Bruno.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Bram. I like this report. One of the things I want to just, and I don't know if maybe it's the CAO, if this needs to be part of our policy. Like originally, you recall when we were going to sell this property, we were going to leave the hydro easement, and then we were going to have to take care of it and cut the grass and own the liability. I just want to make sure that when we get rid of a property, we don't end up with a remnant piece. Because all we're doing is creating a new problem that we're trying to clean up. So when we sell these $1,000 slivers, we should never be creating another sliver in that sale. Like the buyer has to understand that they're buying all of it or none of it, and the easement happens. So, for example, if we sell the lot behind this current sale on Chandler Lane, you can't buy all of it except for the hydro easement there. Or if you have a home and you want 20 feet and we have 28 feet, you got to buy the whole thing. Because I would hate to think that we solve one problem and create a new piece of surplus land. So I don't know if that has to be, Mr. CAO or Bram, in our policy, or it's understood. I just worry that sometimes there's changing faces and changing council, and somebody sells a piece of land without selling it all.
Mr. Cotton?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to councilor and council, I take that as council direction, if that's the will of council, and we'll make sure that doesn't happen, and we'll also work to make sure that that's included as an addendum to our policies as we do our next policy review.
That would be great if you could come back with an addendum and update the policy. That would be great. I don't know if you need a vote or direction on that. Is that fine?
No, that's, council
Very good.
direction's fine.
Thank you.
Thanks. Further questions? All in favor? Carried. Eight point six, city real estate surplus parcels, recommendation that Chief Administrative Office report, Economic Development and Tourism Services Division report 2023-56 be received for information, that council declare the city-owned parcels of land outlined in Appendix A to Chief Administrative Office report, Economic Development and Tourism Services Division report 2023-56 as surplus, and that council delegate authority to the Chief Administrative Officer, CAO, to dispose of these surplus parcels and enter into purchase sale agreements in accordance with the sale of surplus land policy. I have Councillor Bagu. If I can have Councillor Hoyle second that. Councillor Bagu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Basically, I had a meeting, 11 o'clock meeting with Mr. Long today, and he addressed my concerns regarding some of these properties. One of these properties, I've been trying to work on it for 4 years now, and it's great to see it's finally coming to an end, and like the residents are going to be pretty happy. Cost them a little bit of money, but I'm sure they take care of it now instead of calling the city to cut trees or cut grasses or pick up garbage. So, once again, I just thank, staff for bringing this forward finally.
Great. Thank you, Counselor. Any further questions? Bram, I just have one, just with regards to the 52 Elm Street, that's the corner of Elm and Sugarloaf. Family approached my office, it's got about, what, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, somewhere in there. The only thing I did talk to Gary about was just a site triangle to make sure that, I see in red, with the red slashes, it goes almost right to the our sidewalk. But I do have a concern with the site triangle as far as we keep a piece of that because of the rail and the corner, so we can make sure of that. Counselor?
Just on that, Mr. Mayor, if the person buys that sliver of land, the site triangle has to remain because he can't build on it or do anything. So I don't see why we have to keep it, because you can't interfere with the site triangle. The only way you would is you put a tree, a bush, or you build into it. So again, back to the last thing, I would rather not see us, site triangles, I guess, are already protected unless somebody sees that as different.
Yeah, I knew they wouldn't build on that because it's such a small sliver. My real concern is because there is actually a rail and roads there. That's the only thing I do have a concern about. Steve, can you maybe answer that? How can we protect ourselves with regards? Because in essence, it's planting something on that property. We've maintained it, so we made sure nothing's planted there. You know, until somebody, if the person plants something and nobody says anything, and then all of a sudden there's an accident there, are we now in trouble? That's the only thing I'm concerned about.
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. So there could be some issues with them planting trees in the area. When we're going to build, there would be restrictions on the site triangle at that point, so we would flag that during that process.
But the lot's not there to build on. I mean, you couldn't build to that section, so I'm just trying to protect ourselves only because of rail and road there, so.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
Through your worship, to your worship, I guess, to Councillor Bruno.
Well, council in general.
To council in general, and I mean, Steve, I just think of some of the properties I've walked on site visits in the last, whether it's years or even recently a couple of weeks and coming up a day or two from now, there's a lot of sins of the past. There's a lot of things that have been created probably in the people were acting in good faith at the time, but here it is 20, 40, 50, 100 years later, and it's confusing. I think there's a benefit to sticking to 66-foot road allowances, squared up with no, as Councillor Bruno alluded to, I don't know if this is a technical term or not, widowed or orphaned parcels that are confusing to the future, councils of the day and future staffs of the day. Would it maybe be better to, first of all, communicate with the railway? We have good connections there, and make sure that the protection for railway allowances and road allowances is there for our property, and then see if maybe we can register something on title at the time of sale. So sell it all so that there's not a hacked off piece, but register something on title, even though I think we have rules. But what we know, is somebody plants a tree and somebody buries their dog's ashes, or a family member's got married there, and all of a sudden we can't cut that tree down. Well, you're not supposed to do that. Yeah, no. That's just my suggestion, because I don't want to see us create more more remnants.
I totally agree. But this is a little different than 99% of the ones we do, that's all. So if you guys can do that, take that as direction.
Absolutely. I was just going to comment the same, similar to CA Louis, that I believe we can do it through registration on title, so that transfers from owner to owner over time. So we can speak with our lawyer to make sure that that's taken care of.
Yeah, you may want to deal with Steve on actually going out and measuring that area and putting in actual measurements from some type of point there. Obviously, once it's sold, there might be a survey mark or something, but something has to be done with that.
We'll take that as direction and work through that.
Yeah. The geo, yeah, okay, all right. Further questions? All in favor? That's carried. Drain accounting and billing process, recommendation that Corporate Services Department Report 2023-37 be received, and that interest be charged to previously approved and future drain construction accounts effective January 1st, 2023. Interest will be accrued at a rate of bank prime plus 2% on drain construction account balances starting January 1, 2023, and all new charges until billed, not to exceed more than 120 days after the drain construction account completion certificate is issued, and that drain construction accounts be billed when the drainage engineer issues the final completion certificate and account allocations for the drain construction project effective April 11th, 2023. I've got Councillors Bruno and Bodnar moving that. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Just kudos to Mr. Bowles and his group. Another fine that amounts to basically 1% on the taxes that we were foregoing in the past. I think that's over and above the normal scope and course of duties. So thank you for that. I did want an explanation if I could. I'm still not quite clear on this 120 days. The part I don't understand is if the lag can only be up to 120 days, and if we take longer, then it's not on the assessed people on the drain, or we do it within 120 days. I know you have an explanation there. I guess I've got a mental block on how to understand that.
Right.
Through the mayor to council, we're required, once we have that drain certificate, to be back in front of council to request the approval for billing. And we have to do that and then bill within that 120-day period.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with the concept of this as far as getting things right with people now pay full fare for the storm sewers. And this is a part of the drains that was going on the general levy, and now will be going on the people that pay for that drain. I don't know that we got it exactly right yet. Can I impose on the treasurer to give us the Coles Notes version of this and what we're trying to do? And just full disclosure, I have an amendment that I'd like to bring forward after too, but.
Right?
Yeah, so through the mayor to council, there's really two components that are going on here. The first is we have our taxpayers that have been taxed over a period of time, and they're putting money aside in certain reserves because at some point in time we're going to have to do infrastructure work within the city. So those reserves are there, and those reserves are invested, and those reserves earn interest. So when we go to build a drain, we don't have any money to build a drain because there's no budget to build a drain, and those that are on the drain don't put money into a pot to build it up in advance. So they borrow from those reserves. But when they borrow from those reserves, there's no interest earned on those reserves, and the taxpayers that put money aside to be able to build that infrastructure don't have that interest going into the reserve. And as council, and I think we put in the report, notes that our unfunded infrastructure deficit's around $7 million. So it kind of puts the taxpayers that put the money aside thinking that maybe interest would be accumulated over time at a disadvantage. So this report is trying to just look at what other municipalities have done, and this is a very common practice and within the act, is we just charge basically during the construction period interest on the funds that are actually utilized during that construction period. So this is just trying to make sure that those that are going to benefit from the drain, because they have to borrow some money to build it, pay the interest charge of that. So that's the first component. The second component is really talking about we need to make sure that we have timely billing, because nobody wants to pay interest for forever kind of process. So that's where we've said historically what we've always done is we've always waited for the province to do the final sign off. And that final sign-off can take 12 to 16 months at sometimes. Our drain superintendent has identified that we've never had the province not sign off on a drain. So the recommendation is, and it's a follow to what a lot of other municipalities do, is they bill as soon as they get that final certificate. And that would be our recommendation. So you bill a lot sooner, and then we don't accrue the interest for the extra year. I guess the component that council has to consider, and we as staff consider, is sometimes drains don't go perfectly smooth. At some point in time, you may approve for a drain, you have your engineer's report, and then we go through and we should be able to build it often when we do these construction drains. And talking to the superintendent, if it's a smooth process, it can take 6 to 12 months. And then after that 6 to 12 months, we would get the certificate of completion, and we'd go forward and we could build. But we all know from history, we have a lot of drains that haven't worked out that smoothly. So I think that would be the one thing that I just point out in full transparency to council, that it's designed for the straightforward drain process. It's designed to try to eliminate the inequity that happens, because those that are put money into the reserves kind of expect there to be interest earned, so those reserves grow and they can pay for that infrastructure and keep up with inflation. And it's designed to try to ensure that there's a process that we bill as quickly as possible.
Councillor?
Thank you. And I think the past history part is important. If we get the billing out in a quick manner, and then it shouldn't be a big hardship on people in the drain. But what if it doesn't go that way? What if there's stalls? What if it's 1 year, 2 years, people are paying interest, we still haven't billed because something happened? And we're gonna see one coming to us for final completion that was started in 1990. How would you like to pay interest from 1990 to now? I don't think that's the intent. And but there has to be something in there that if there's some anomaly or weird stuff that goes on, that staff will look at that and make a decision. It's out of the norm, you know, maybe there's something that could be done. I think my amendment captures some of it, and also because I don't quite think we've got this perfect and we may want to fine tune it, that staff should come back to us each year with a report on the drains that were billed and the results of this new system, to see if there's something that can be, you know, that can be tweaked. Is now a time I should read that amendment? Mr. Mayor, or?
Yeah, you can put the amendment on the floor, sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just, and then there may be questions or something. So that staff present an annual report to update council on the operational and financial components of all drain construction projects. That staff recommend to council in the annual report if interim billing should be considered on a drain by drain basis. Can I expand on that, or is that going to stand as it is? Just
if you want to add to it, that's your
no,
amendment.
I just want to explain the
Well, not
interim
till-
billing.
I got to get a seconder, we'll get it on the
Okay.
floor. A seconder to the amendment, Councillor Bruno, Councillor Bodnar.
Okay. So the interim billing, I guess, could be, while it may be confusing to staff, and I'll leave that to the treasurer, but that could be done if there is some kind of weird stuff going on so that people can get a bill paid and then they wouldn't be paying interest on that while they're trying to figure out what went wrong in the whole drainage system, and they won't have to wait a year or two paying interest when it really wasn't their fault because they want to pay, right? Like they're not doing anything wrong, they just want to pay so they don't have to pay so much interest. So anyways, that's kind of the interim billing part. Did I mess that up, Mr. Treasurer, or is that
Ryan,
through
is he
you?
fine on that?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, I think you did a great job. And from staff's perspective, adding that component to this this procedure policy going forward has a good benefit because it creates that opportunity for council to look at something and apply some common sense if there is the requirement for additional, maybe an interim billing. And I think just to the councillor's comment, interim billing is a little complicated with respect to drains because sometimes there's an estimate of what the drain's going to cost and sometimes it costs less. Sometimes we also, actually all the time when we issue for construction drains, we give residents the opportunity to pay over 5 years. And then if they choose over 5 years, there is interest over those 5 years. So if we do an interim bill, we would have to decide at that point in time, do we want to extend the 5 years at the interim? And then do we have a second 5 years? So now could you have like 5 years for half and then 5 years for the other half later? Those are questions of council to consider. So there is some complexity with interim billing, but it doesn't mean it's the wrong answer in certain situations. And that's where staff is certainly appreciative of the councillor's comments.
Questions to the amendment?
Thank you. I like the spirit of the amendment. I'm just, my only concern is that, again, back to players change, right? And does this, like, how does this get systematized so that it doesn't fall off the rails if everybody here tonight who understands it isn't around the table? Like, I thought maybe before Councillor Bodnar introduced his amendment, I appreciated the comment and liked the fact that it's this way, the way the report intended, but if it falls off the rails or there's one of those hiccups, the Ward 4 councillor or someone is going to mention it, because I think about when we did storm sewers. After the fact, we raised the issue that some people might not be in the storm sewer shed. And although it took a while, staff corrected it and they gave those people rebates for what they had overpaid. And that allowed, to me, although it wasn't interest bearing either, now that I think of it, coming back, it at least allowed the system to not go into pause or create interim billing until those 109 accounts, which turned out to be 400 and some odd, got corrected. Like, I can live with the amendment if there's some way of codifying it that it does come forward, because I'll always be interested in listening to reasons where people were unfairly treated and they deserve a rebate. I just didn't want it to be, it's a lot easier when the system's automatic and you raise the question as opposed to you having to do it each time. So I don't know if I've explained that
Brian?
well.
Through the mayor to the councillor and council on that, I think my interpretation of the amendment is that we would just come back annually with an update to make sure council is well aware of what's going on with all the drains with respect to the activity and the financials, because often and historically the drains are one line in the financial statements and nobody realizes that they're multiple drains. And that's why when we quote a $3 million number right now in drain construction. So that would just be, I think, good governance transparency for council. And then the second component is, like, staff would then recommend if we did see ourselves something that might want to consider the interim billing, staff would likely recommend not to interim bill in most situations because hopefully things are going well. But then council, like on any decision, can say where staff has said this is based on the evidence we have right now, we would recommend this. council can then say, we appreciate that, but we're gonna vote or direct staff in a different way. So it's really just about giving information to council, then council can make an informed decision.
Could we then just put a date to that every year, annually? What I worry about is things go along smoothly and it looks like, and then it isn't over, you know? All of a sudden something comes up. And so now do the point of reviewing it comes a year after something that went wobbly or 2 weeks after that deadline. Like, I just don't want to see where the system doesn't have a check-all.
Brian?
So through the mayor to the councillor, maybe I'm getting your, maybe I get it a little bit better now. I think what you're saying is, should we attach that report should come back by April 30th or something like that? And I think what I might suggest is that we would bring that report back with the financial statement completion, because when I think I've noted to councillors that the financial statements, the audit is just about complete, and we'll bring that back. So if council wanted to say that report would come back with the audited statements or in that vicinity, that would be fine with staff.
I'm okay with it.
All right, further questions?
Mr. Mayor, through you to the treasurer, and I don't know whether you know this, but you may. Lana's not here this evening, but so this is from somebody has a farm property, and those farm properties pay a fair amount of money sometimes. So in the event OMAFRA identifies a change to be made, how do agricultural property owners know if and when staff would rebill or refund as required?
So through the mayor to the councillor and council, we would have an obligation to, once we receive that information, to then look at it, corroborate it, and then come back to council and notify council. So we have an obligation to bring that back to council, and then council would have to approve the adjustment in the billing, and if there was a refund required, staff would process that refund.
So would we say a month after you find out about it? Is that a fair, just as a timeline?
Through the mayor to the councillor, I may not know the exact time. It may be the 120 days. I don't have our drain superintendent to help me with that one.
Mr. Mayor, I'll deal directly with the drain superintendent and get back to the person that asked that. And that is a question that I asked, knowing that OMAFRA has always come through. We have never had that problem with a change so far at the end. So it may never happen, but it could. So.
Okay, questions to the amendment? To the amendment?
Yes. Or so are we going to add that date of our annual financial statements to Councillor Bodner's? Is that what you're suggesting, Brian? Or that could happen?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, I think that from a staff's perspective, we appreciate that. Operationally, that's very simplistic for us because the audit's done and all of that.
Friendly amendment, mover? Seconder? Okay, I'll take it as a friendly amendment. Any further questions on the amendment? All in favor? That's carried. Back to the motion as amended. Any further questions? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, council. On to correspondence. One item is 9.3. This is a resolution that the town of Plimpton, Wyoming, which is in Ontario, for those that don't know, that's honest first I've ever heard of it. Yes, I've never heard of Plimpton, Wyoming. Is that where it is? Okay. What is, they had a motion 13 that council support item M of correspondence from the municipality of Chatham, Kent regarding Bill 5, Stopping Harassment and Abuse by Local Leaders Act. I've got Councillor Aquilina that wants to bring something forward on this, because all it is on here is vote to receive it. So I'll go to Councillor Aquilina, and I'm sure I'll be looking for a seconder. Councillor Aquilina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I received correspondence through a group who informed me of what Bill 5 was. Apparently, it was in the process at some point, and then with the provincial election, it had gotten dropped, and so they're trying to get a motion to get it moving again, and I think it kind of corresponds with the training that we've all taken for harassment and violence in the workplace, and relates to code of conduct. I think that council should have. I don't feel that any council has breached this, but I think it's important to be in place, and so I would like to make a motion to support this.
Okay, seconder for this? Councillor Danch? Any further questions on it? Everybody understand what it is? If you actually look at Bill 5, I think one of the big things is they want to be able to get rid of councillors if they go over the line, which you can't today. Unless you commit some heinous crime. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing what some councillors in this province get away with. But anyways, seeing no further questions, all those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, council. Okay, we are at motions. There are none. Notice of motion. Councillor Aquilina.
Give me 1 second. I would like to provide notice of my intention to bring forward a motion at the April 25th, 2023 council meeting to have a staff report prepared regarding the options for LOS 1RO residents for the access into Sherkston Shores Sun Retreats property, if that's possible.
Yep, that's perfect. Okay. So that'll come forward at the next meeting. Next is the minutes, or sorry, any other notices of motion? And I knew we had one, but I didn't know we had any more. Next is minutes of boards and commissions and committees. Port Colborne Historical and Marine Museum minutes of February, the 21st. Can I have councillors Hoyle and Danch move that one? Any questions with regards to those minutes? All in favor? That's carried. Bylaws. Bylaws 20.1, 20.2, 20.3, 20.4, and 20.5. If I could have councillors Beauregard and Bagu move the bylaws. Any questions to any of the bylaws? All in favor? That's carried. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our meeting. At this time I will now adjourn, and we thank you for watching. We thank those that joined us in chambers this evening. Great conversation and great debate tonight, council. Thank you very much. We'll see you next meeting.